Welcome, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So the talk today is about designing for AI and how is it different from any design that you might have done before. And we'll go into a little bit of details about that, and I'll give you a little pointers, right? But I want to just make sure I'm setting the right expectation for this conversation. So designing for AI is it's a shift in paradigm, I would say, for all of us designers who've been designing, because it is very different than traditional computation. And what I'm going to talk to you about is sort of give you some guide about what the things you need to think about when you're designing, right? I'm not here to give you prescriptions about exactly how you're going to design, but the things that you need to consider when you're approaching your design for AI and how that's going to be different than how you might have done this design in the past. So with that, I have put together a few slides. I know that we have an hour together. Don't know if it will take a full hour, but we'll have a whole Q&A at the end. Believe you should be able to take yourself off mute, ask a question if you have. I'll be more than glad to have some conversations further about this. Okay. So today's agenda, I'll do a little introduction about myself so you get to know a little bit about who I am. Why am I here talking about this? We'll talk about the problem statement. One thing I will say is that it's very important for AI design for a well-defined problem statement, right? Design has been sort of now in the zeitgeist, especially because of ChatGPT and generative AI. And it's become like the sexy thing, right? Everybody's wanting to get their hands on. But I feel a lot of the times we're trying to retrofit the solution into the problem. And sometimes AI is not the good thing for, it's not going to solve all of our problems depending on what that problem is. So defining the problem statement will be very important. So we'll go into a little bit after that, talking about the difference between AI and classical computing. What is the real difference between the two? We'll talk about designing with integrity. And what does that mean? Like, what is it that we should be doing as designers in order to make sure that the user understands that they are interacting with an AI and not necessarily just with traditional software? And there are different forms in which AI presents itself, right? We've experienced a lot of this through voice interfaces. If you have like Siri or, Alexa, but AI can be embedded into software. So making sure that whenever you're in experience and there is an AI that's going to make a decision for about anything within that experience, you need to make sure that the user is aware. Thinking about designing for human in the loop. Human in the loop is a very intrinsic AI terminology that we use, right, to make sure that we're giving humans the full control of what the final decision that AI will be making. Really intentionally thinking about feedback loops, because AI feeds on data, and so therefore make sure that they're correct is very important. We'll touch about explainability. Explainability is important to make sure that you are addressing within the experience. I also want to mention that explainability is a pillar of AI trust. And that's going to be a whole different conversation that I will give, a whole different talk I'll give in 2 months from now. So, and we're also going through Q&A. So this is a series of talks. So today I'm just talking about some of the UX considerations that you will need in order to design for AI. Nonetheless, there are 2 additional talks that I will give. One is a month from now. If you go to, I think, to the Luma site, you should be able to see all the events that Design Lab is putting on. And I believe it's actually April 4th is when I will be giving the talk about data. So data is very important. An aspect that is controlled by data scientists. However, as designers, we need to be very understanding how data works and different types of data so that we are influencing the decisions that are being made that goes into an AI model. So that will be coming up next month. And then the following month, I will be doing another talk about the pillars of trust and what are those, right? So here I want to touch upon explainability just for a little bit, tell you a little bit about how you can make sure that is ensured through the experience. But I'll go a lot more in depth about explainability, about drift, about fairness. Those are kind of the the three main lists of pillars of trust. We'll go in deeper into that in a couple months. Okay, so introduction, a little bit about me. So currently I am the lead designer and strategist for AI on IBM Z. I lead a group of designers and design strategy for our enterprise clients, helping adopt AI capabilities on IBM's mainframes. So we design enterprise AI solutions that power most of the world's transactions. So when you think of IBM Z and systems, really you're looking at these huge computers. They are really processing most, if not all, of your credit card transactions, your bank transactions, and others, like a lot of healthcare, insurers. We have 10 insurers that use mainframes, 25 retailers. So a lot of Fortune 500 companies are using our systems in order to process data. And we process about 90% of all credit card transactions, like I said. And so we hold about 80% of the world's business data. So this is very powerful stuff. I would say it's also very dense in knowledge, like it's very deep technical knowledge that you have to have. I've also, been in the space for 15 years, designing for over 15 years now, or about. I've worked in startups. I've worked in healthcare, telecom, and nonprofits in the past. My main discipline as designer is UX. However, even in my current role, I've done, do currently support research. I've done visual. I've done content design. So I run the gamut of design, but my real strength is in UX. I'm attaching here my LinkedIn. I guess URL. Let me see if I can get it for you guys. I'll post that here on the chat in case you want to stay connected or you have additional questions beyond this talk. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always open and try to answer messages as soon as I can. Okay. So moving on, we want to talk about a little bit about the problem statement. Like I said in the very beginning, fundamentally, the most important aspect of before you start designing is to understand the problem you're solving for. AI may actually not be the solution for the problem you're trying to solve, right? So be very cognizant for who you're designing and what problem statement you're creating and making sure that AI is the right solution. Again, it's very sexy. ChatGPT is everywhere. They're creating, they just launched a week ago, an AI video generator, right? You can create videos. So there's a lot of hype going on around with these large language models and what they can do to create a new content. But be really prescriptive of how this is solving the problem or if it is, right? So I will tell you about some of the use cases that have been identified here at IBM that have been really great at where AI really plays a really great role in solving problems. So the first place is to give recommendations. AI is really great at aggregating information, historical data on a user and giving a recommendation. So for instance, it might be very familiar if you go to Spotify, they might recommend you a playlist, or then they might recommend you a genre, or a singer that you might like, or they compile together a playlist for you based on the songs that you've liked in the past, right? So that's kind of the thing that AI can be potentially very good at doing. So the other thing that AI can really do really well is anticipate disruption. So I said that, I work with these very large servers. And we process a lot of data. So what AI can be really good at, so let's say that we have a really large retailer and there is a big sales event coming up, right? So it's going to jam up the system with a lot of transactions, a lot of information. And what the last thing that that retailer wants to do is to have any disruption into the system, right? People are coming into the store, you want to buy stuff, you don't want to have any problems like all of a sudden nothing is working. So AI is really good about telling the users like, okay, expect that you're going to have an X amount of spike in usage, and then help you prepare for how may you anticipate that and how may you mitigate that disruption. AI is also very good at detecting liability. One of the big things that I and my team works on is creating solutions for fraud detection. So that will be a really good example. So being able to analyze the historical, again, looking at the data that a client may have, a bank may have about all of its clients, and be able to see, okay, this is actually fraud. This is actually somebody trying to commit anti-money laundering, right? So that will be an example of detecting a liability. So AI can also comb through topics and really help research. Um, it's really good at really, again, aggregating large amounts of data and to be able to really find the most important information by looking at that really large set of data. It's can really create personalization through natural language. So it's really good at giving a really good user experience by communicating with users with natural language. So to help the user solve a problem or achieve a goal. So think about like, your very good chatbot, and helping the user solve a customer service question. AI obviously can collect a lot of information. You can parse at a scale, collect knowledge from all sorts of different sources, and really give users a ground truth, right? So ChatGPT is a really good example, right? It's sourcing information from all over the internet, and then being able to, really answer a question. Most of the time, right, it's giving you some information, but ChatGPT will also, as we call it, hallucinate. Hallucinate is when a large language model tries to fill in the information that it doesn't know by creating information that's incorrect. So you just have to be mindful of that, right? Large language models can sometimes be inaccurate in that sense. Okay. So what is the real difference between AI and classical computing? AI is probabilistic, right? So, and classical computer is deterministic. So deterministic versus probabilistic computing. So as you can see here on my chart, I really have a user flow, right? We can start at user flow. We can determine time and again how the interaction is going to be for every single time the user interacts with your software. If a user does this, then this happens, right? There's a systems of rules established that you can create that will always be repeatable. And so it's very prescriptive, right? It can give you if-then statements and or statements, but you can repeat that interaction time and again. With AI, it's collecting data from the real world, right? We create an AI model with training data, and then the AI model is going to use the live data that is receiving constantly on a day-to-day to make better decisions. And what it's going to do is give you a confidence score. Or it's going to give you a prediction. It's going to tell you with a certain amount of confidence or certainty that this is correct or this is not correct, this is negative, or this is, for instance, this is fraud or not fraud, right? And because the data is, you're constantly looking at the data as it evolves, the output can change over time. So therefore, it's really hard to predict time and again what that output is going to be. So that's very keen, and that's kind of where when I was talking about earlier about what does it mean to have that paradigm shift. That is where the paradigm shift comes, because it's really hard to say, like, You might ask Siri a question today, and 3 months from now, you can ask the same question. You might get a different answer because it has become smarter, it has evolved over time, it has learned. So it might be able to give you a better, more precise answer as it learns. So because it is probabilistic, we really need to think about designing for integrity. So designing for integrity means that we need to think about affordances and signifiers, right? This is the most common term that we hear in UX design, right? Like affordances, signifiers, it's all important. And it's still true to AI design. So the reason I say this is because it's really easy for you to, when you are going to ChatGPT, you right off the bat, right? I'm going to interact with an AI. However, AI is becoming more ubiquitous and part of our daily lives. So sometimes you might be designing something that is embedding AI into your experience. So you have to be very cognizant of letting your users know that at certain point of the interaction, there might be interacting with an AI. So for example, to me, there's nothing worse, right? You go on a website and all of a sudden you hear like a bing, and the bing is like this chat bot that's sitting on the side, and you're like, hey, ask me a question. Well, am I talking to a human? Because there's a human face to this chat bot. Am I talking to a real AI? Who is behind this, the scene here, right? So really make sure that you are telling the user right away when they're interacting with an AI. And you can do that in several ways, right? Again, I can't be prescriptive. Everybody's interactions are different. Do you use sound? Do you use a visual cue, some sort of luminosity effect to denote that they are now interacting with an AI? That the AI might have made a decision within your software, right? So I don't know if you're say you're working on a software to analyze the stocks over the past 2 years. You might know in some way that AI has made a decision that the stock over the past year has performed well. So therefore, it's making a prediction that will continue to perform well given the market conditions, right? So just make sure there's no questions from the users that they're interacting with an AI versus a deterministic software, or if they're interacting with a human, right? In the case of a chatbot. So make sure it's very clear, because without it, then your experience is going to fall apart. Users will lose confidence about what is true, what is fact, and what is fiction. The next aspect of a really good user experience is thinking about human in the loop. So I would say that my point of view is that AI is here to augment human intelligence, not replace human intelligence, right? So we're here, AI is going to serve to help humans make better decisions. And so especially when we're talking about experiences that really require a lot of human, or has a big cost to humans, you must definitely ensure that that humans have the final decision before an AI can take action on anything. So for instance, if we go back to the example I was just using about if you're working on on a software that's using AI to make decisions or predictions about stock prices, right? You can say, would you like our system to go ahead and purchase the stock for you? And potentially you can go ahead and if the user says yes, then you can have the system go ahead and make that decision, right? However, the user has to be really fully aware of what that decision is going to be and the implications of that decision. So making sure that the user can have final control is very definitely important. So really think about the interaction and the cost that the interaction will have for the user. If it's going to cost their money, if it's going to potentially impact other people's lives. So if doctors if you're going to use AI to help doctors make decide on a prescription, then you need to make sure that the doctors have the final say about what prescriptions are being ordered or not. So keep that in mind. The other aspect for AI is feedback. So feedback loops are very, very important. This is how AI will become better and learn and give better predictions and therefore give a better user experience at the end. So 3 different types of feedback mechanisms that you can consider. There is explicit, implicit, and dual feedback. So dual feedback is a combination of implicit and explicit feedback. So explicit feedback is when you are intentionally, or the user is intentionally giving feedback to improve your AI system. So this is often qualitative. So whether the AI suggestion was helpful or not. So, you might have seen this if you experienced, again, if you go back to the chatbot example, they might say, was a suggestion helpful? Yes or no. If you say yes, right, it will, great, it continues on. If no, it might even open a new dialogue box asking as to why it wasn't helpful, so that it can incorporate those changes into the model and then make it better the next time. So it could be different, right? So we said the thumbs up, thumbs down idea was one of the things. You can use surveys, you can use, again, comments, like I just said. All of those open-ended text fields can also be a really good way of explicit feedback. And that way you can also give users a lot more control over what's going on with the system, right? They feel a part of making sure that the system is becoming better. And take also into account that explicit feedback is supposed to be really good for unambiguous responses when, unambiguous responses from users about AI performance. Then we have implicit feedback. So this is about data observations from user behavior and interactions within your product. So that could be a log. In some ways, you can kind of, like, if we go back to the chatbot, example, it's sometimes you can just look to see how long, just based on the conversation, how many back and forth did the chatbot have with the user before the user was satisfied with the answer, right? That's a way to look at the user behavior. And there's also a lot of plenty of software that already exists that you can kind of track how the users are interacting with your software. So perhaps your user is interacting with the AI, but quickly then closes that AI part of the experience. Obviously, that would require additional research on their part. However, getting that feedback will give you some understanding as to why that's going on and what is going on, and you might need to do additional, more explicit research to understand why that is happening. So it could be, again, you can use user interviews, like to track the customer service conversations that could be happening. Even, let's say that if for instance the user was using a chatbot but then had to call the customer service, maybe in the customer service logs, there may be observations that you can make. Any observations that users are doing through social media, for instance, that could be a way. Again, any observation about user behavior will be good for implicit feedback. And then, of course, the dual feedback is when you're implementing both of them together, right? So again, if I go back to the example of the chatbot, you can say the thumbs up, thumbs down is the explicit feedback, but then you can always going back and taking a look at the conversation that's happening between the bot and the user. Because a lot of the times, what the user says and what the user does are not necessarily the same thing, right? So the user can say at the end of that interaction, did this answer your question? They can say, yes, it did answer the question. However, it might have taken them 5 minutes to get to a question that potentially could have taken them, maybe 30 seconds to get to. So something that to consider as you are designing your interaction. And again, the last part of this is to give explainability, right? So what is explainability? Explainability is, how are your AI making decisions about the output? So consider the touch points that you have with the experience and the AI. So let's say that you're creating a software that it's going to help kayakers get from point A to point B, on the Hudson River. Hudson River. I'm here in New York. It's not that far away from my house. So you might think, well, that could be easy, but you can be using AI to kind of calculate, based, because the Hudson River has a current and the wind, and all of those factors might impact what time the user may get and how fast they might be paddling, right? So based on that data, you might give a prediction that it might take them 20 minutes to get to point B, but also make sure that you're giving them the explanation as to why you're choosing this route. We're choosing this route because it's going to reduce that wind resistance, or it's going to be the best route because you actually have some, you have some rapids we want to avoid. So all of that information can be really useful and add trust to the experience. So really explain whenever possible how AI is being predictive, the outcomes, and how the output was achieved. And this is really the basis of my conversation today. Again, I really wanted to just lay out some of the considerations you need to think through as a UX designer, and think about sort of these touch points throughout the experience, and how this is going to really get you to achieve that good AI experience, and how these things are different than the design that you might have done for potentially an app, or a software, or even a website. So that's all I wanted to discuss for today. Again, a month from now, we'll have another conversation about data and go very deep into data, the different types of how data is parsed, so you can have a better understanding of that. And then we'll also go deeper into the pillars of trust, and we'll go deeper into explainability. With that, I'll open up for questions. Anybody have any questions they want to talk about? Feel free to post them on the chat, or feel free to come out mute if you want to. Hi, Daniel. Go ahead. I think you can. Believe you can come off mute.
Yeah, I was trying. I had to pop up
Okay,
my way.
awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I have an example. I was hoping that you could consider applying some of what you just spoke about.
Sure.
Keeping in the financial realm, here's a spreadsheet, ChatGPT, whatever. Here's a spreadsheet of my financial information for the past year. Please put together a financial report for year-end stakeholders. If you consider explainability, what in that instance would you, in your expert opinion, have the AI explain to the user?
So, right. So if you're going on ChatGPT, one is figuring out how they came up with that information. So especially when you're talking about large language models, I think the consideration that you need to have is where the information is being sourced from. So I was able to determine this information from, I don't know, let's say that you're wanting information on Icarus. I don't know, just that came to mind. That's, a Greek mythology. And they can say, well, I was able to compile this. This is information. They'll give you a paragraph who that Icarus was. But then it can give you that, this was sourced from Wikipedia, or this was sourced from, like, I don't know, a journal, an academic journal coming from a university, right? And they can, that's one of the things I think it's really lacking today from large language models. One of the things I'll say that we are working at IBM is to really construct, how do we bring explainability to large language models, so that the user can know where it was sourced from, and also know, like, what percentage of that source was it used to construct the, the information given back to you? I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, it seems a little bit like citations. Maybe that's too academic type of a thing, but that's kind of what I'm reminded of.
Correct. Yes, it would be something like, yeah, this is where we compiled the information from. But yes, citations. I think it's a good mental model to have. There was a question on the chat about from Xinyu. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Based on the current job market, how do you recommend young professionals to pivot their career into UX? Maybe also AI included. Is the master's PhD necessary, or boot camps are fine? Job experiences are more important. So this is a really good question, and one of the questions that I get asked a lot. And I think it might be, to be honest, it's a very subjective answer I'm going to give you, because I think it's based on my experience working with designers. I would say that I value more somebody's experience being able to do the job as somebody who has a master's degree in human computer interaction. Master's degrees don't necessarily make you a designer. And designing is one, having a little bit of design technical skills is what I like to call, right? So if you're a user experience designer, well, wireframes is the basic like UX 101 that you need to know, right? But I also want to know how you think. So a boot camp, it might be, I would say boot camps are really good. I don't discount boot camps. They're really great. A place for you to learn sort of the mechanics of being a designer, right? But having the experience of like, once you're finished with a boot camp, I would say, try to get an internship. And so that you can kind of start to really think like a designer, because designing, creating wireframes is just the basics, right? We have to think about, like I said, what you have to be intentional about design, intentional about the decisions that you're using. So why did you decide to place the button here? Well, it might be because you're thinking about the laws of proximity, right? So if you think about just those laws of perception and you think about proximity, you think that it's going to be important, because, or else there might create confusion about what is the users trying to do in your interaction. So, and that's what I mean. There is that thinking that needs to happen, right? So I would say that having a boot camp is really good. And I think that should give you enough to really get going in the field. Okay, so there is another comment from Leona. You mentioned using AI to map and code large amounts of research data. What AI tools are available for this now? Okay, so there's actually a really good point, and something, Leona, I will probably address that in the next talk. For the data aggregation and managing and wrangling, that I call it, is done by a data scientist. So data scientist, a lot of the time, one, either you're going to work with somebody, if you're working in a product that infuses AI, you must have a data scientist on board and work with them. So today, right, if you think about conventional software, you're going to be working with a developer. If you're working with an AI, you're going to be working with a developer and a data scientist. Or, in my case, like the case of my team, we create products that helps data scientists understand what the AI model is doing. So it's very important that you work with data scientists. And so data scientists uses a lot of tools to manage data and create AI models. And we can go dive deeper into that. But I would say that's really not a concern for a designer. But for a designer, what I would say is a concern is how is data managed, and how important is data to an AI model for you to understand those concepts is going to be more important than knowing the tools itself. Okay. So from Sophia, I'm wondering if you could speak more about the probabilistic mode of AI and its impact on modularity in interface design. Since AI is always learning, and the outcome is generates is always changing, how might design evolve or be more evolvable based on AI? Thanks. So yeah, Sophia, I think to your point, AI, it is always evolving because the data potentially could change over time. So the output may change over time. I think there has to be, just like with any other type of product design, there is a cyclical way of how we do product design, right? We put something out and then we come back, we analyze, we ensure that it's still functioning, it's working, it's still meeting pain points, we iterate and make it better. The same thing applies to AI. So whenever you're putting out a software, again, having those, that's why feedback mechanisms are really important, because that's really going to be able to allow you to track how the, one of the ways, right, it's allowing the users to track how the AI is responding or giving a feedback to the user, or output to the user, I should say. We will also discuss in the third talk about the trust pillars. So there are different ways that data scientists track how AI models are behaving. Explainability is one of them. We just touched a little bit on the surface, so we can understand the concept of explainability. We'll dive a little bit deeper. What does it really mean to have explainability? There's drift. Models can drift. So what does that mean? Data scientists are going to train a model based on training data, right? They use training data. So it's a subset of their existing data, and they use that to train a model. And they go back and forth, right? It's an arduous process that data scientists do in order to get that AI model to be quote unquote perfect and ready for production. Then, once that model is set and it's in production, it's going to use real data, right, to figure out what predictions it needs to make. And that real data sometimes can deviate from the training data. And therefore, the model starts to do things that it was intended to do. And so data scientists does a lot of monitoring post-production to ensure that that model is going to be effective and still following the business rules that was set from the very beginning. So all of these are going to be how you will track the evolution of your AI model. Okay, do you have any advice for designers working on products for startups in the AI space, particularly for data security? So I would say data security can be its own talk, because securing data and data encryption can be challenging of its own. There's also a challenge that you will a lot of hear at times. It might not be on the startup, but things that we've encountered with clients here is personal information. So you have to keep in mind that personal information is personal information. Therefore, it should never be disclosed. So if it cannot be disclosed, then you probably cannot use that data. So it's hard to get to that data. So how do you create a model if you don't have all the data you need? That's also a big question that happens a lot when you're thinking about AI. But I would say security is definitely an aspect of how data is being used. And one of the things I think that in the AI space, we are still very much in the early side of pioneering that, because there's a whole field of secure AI that I think we're still touching the surface from an industry perspective, right? How do you secure the AI? How do you know the nefarious actors are interacting with their AI and the data that's being fed into the AI, and so that the model is making the predictions it needs? Do you have any books relating to human-computer interaction, UX, UI that you recommend if designing for developing products in tech and AI? So if you, Andrew, what I would suggest is feel free to, so sorry, it's a time for the dog to start connecting with me. So I would say, what else, Jess, let's connect on LinkedIn, Andrew. I can give you a little bit more feedback. There's nothing off the top of my head that I can think right now. One of the challenges I would also say in the industry of AI is, this idea of like, what is the best practice for AI design? Again, the industry, believe it or not, I think we look at ChatGPT and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like doing so many things, right? And Elon Musk is telling us, oh my God, AI is going to become our overlords. But the truth of the matter is, the industry in itself is very new, right? Or very nascent in a way when we think about experiences, or when we're thinking about like, what is the best practices. So there is a lot of stuff that's still being in development that doesn't exist. One of the things that I found challenging, in the beginning of, as I was transitioning into AI design, is really figuring out what are their best practices. Is there a book there I can read? And there's some articles out there I can look it up and point you to, but I haven't yet found that that like, you know like cradle of like information where you're going to be able to find that. So a lot of it's just being based on experiences and things that we are formulating as we are learning more about how large language models work, and and other more traditional AI like machine learning and deep learning. So Rebecca, explainability, the method of explainability will likely depend on the nature of the input. There are fundamentally 5 prompt methods: iterative, summative, inferring, transforming, expanding. So she's responding to Daniel. It sounds like your example was based on summarizing for the specific issue. Yeah, probably source of explainability. Kristen, in my experience with AI output, it doesn't always come out with the most human-friendly language. If an AI is constantly evolving, what methods have you deployed to make sure that language remains friendly to a non-technical end user? Okay. I think, Kristen, you actually make a really good point, because especially when you were talking about, just like you were talking about, if you're doing a website, what is the tone of voice that you want to use when you're talking to users, right? It's important. Again, it goes back to the idea of the problem statement, right? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Who is the user you're solving for? And you can also identify the tone of voice and how you want to address the answers that the users are asking. Is it a more friendly tone? Is it more professional, more more traditional tone? But there's also the fact, when you're talking about like natural language, large language models, there has to be a lot of fine tuning, right? A lot of fine tuning that has to be done, that's happening in the back end in order to give you that more kind of natural language feedback. And I think there is a lot of testing, if you're working on things like that, that it needs to be done before something gets shipped. But those things could be very caught on early if you're doing testing and looking at how the model is being fine-tuned, and what prompts and prompt tuning you're doing to ensure that the model is going to give the output the user would expect. Prajal, with the AI age, designers designing for UX for big the gap can be for UX design for AI or non-AI digital experiences. How can UX designers leverage this to take better design decisions for respective platforms? I don't quite follow, Prajal. If you want to come off mute and perhaps explain your question.
Yeah, so I've added in the corrected version, so I want to understand how big the difference between AI and non-AI platform is for UX designers, and how as UX designers we can leverage this idea and make better design decisions, either
Okay.
be it designing for UX for AI platforms or for non-AI platforms. How big is the gap?
Um, so if I understand your question correctly, it all depends. I think it's going to depend on what, again, I go back, right? What is the problem you're solving for? Because it could be that you are embedding AI into your experience, or it could be that you're creating an AI of its own. So for instance, what do I mean? So if I go back to the example I gave earlier, right? Maybe you're embedding AI to make decisions about like stock the stock that somebody should buy. So your software already exists. You're just adding functionality to help the user make better decisions. Now, you could also be working on, on a voice assistant. So you could be working on, on a product that's, leveraging Alexa to help users do something with voice. So, and those are also very different, right? So the modality of how you approach it could also impact how you choose, how you make your UX decisions. So I'm not sure if it answers your questions, but I hope it does.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So everybody seems to be worried recently about the impact AI might have over the design jobs available. What are your personal thoughts on that? Will AI be able to create designs from scratch eventually? And what will put design teams at risk for layoffs? Okay, and that will put, okay. So Christina, it's a very good question. I think, as even if I talk with my mentors who've been, industry even for longer than me, I I do see a world where potentially, AI could potentially be doing part of our jobs, not maybe not all of it, but part of it. I do see a world, not today, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, where creating wireframes become obsolete because AI can create wireframes and create the output it needs. However, you got to think about it. AI still needs the instruction to understand how to create those. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry about that. I think people started to drop. I apologize for that. I lost my connection. Is anybody having any additional final questions about any of the things that we talked about earlier? Any final questions? Unfortunately, I can't see the messages anymore. From an academic standpoint, any thoughts on what instructors should be including in coursework to ensure students are AI ready in their design careers? One thing I will say, I think it's very important. When I was doing my master's program, we did have a class on human-computer interaction for AI. And again, I would say that there needs to be more of that, and there has to be more academic work on what is UX for AI. That's one of the works that I've been involved in at IBM, and one of the works that needs better definition, because I think right now we are defining things as we go, right? But hopefully that will be more of that to share with students as well. Any more questions before we close out? We have 3 more minutes. Again, I apologize for the interruption. You guys have access to my LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. If I wasn't able to answer any of your questions, I apologize. Do reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation. And definitely look out for the other 2 talks. Like I said, I will go more in depth about the importance of understanding data and how important that is to a model. And then we'll talk about the pillars of trust, go much deeper into explainability, drift, fairness. So we'll talk a lot about that in the near future. So and sign up. And again, just letting you guys know, I was learned through this today. My limit is 100 invitees. So after 100, you guys will go into a waiting list. And yeah, so sign up if you want to, so that you have a spot on the live session. And I will share the recording with the team, so hopefully people can always watch it afterwards as well. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all of you coming by. I hope this was really helpful. We'll hopefully talk to you again in a month. Hope to see you soon. Thanks, everyone.